Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Kyera Singleton, and I am the Executive Director of the Royal House and Slave Quarters, a museum located in Medford, Massachusetts. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us from what is sure to be an inspiring night of poetry and conversation from the esteemed Boston Poet Laureate, Porsha Olayiwola. This event marks the second installment of our series, Poetry as Protest. If this is your first time tuning in to one of our virtual events, I'd like to say welcome. And if you are a regular supporter of our work, I'd like to say welcome back. Before we begin the program, I am just going to give a little bit of background about the museum. In the 18th century, the Royal House and Slave Quarters was home to the largest slaveholding family in Massachusetts and the enslaved people who made their lavish way of life possible. Today, the Royal House and Slave Quarters is a museum whose architecture, household items, archaeological artifacts, and programs bear witness to intertwined stories of wealth and bondage. More importantly, our goal is to situate the lives of the enslaved people who lived at our site in a long history of freedom and resistance, and to connect the legacies of enslavement to the realities of systemic injustice today. Poetry events and performances help create not only empathy, but also awareness about the role that art can play in difficult histories, but also in our collective freedom dreams. I cannot wait to see what Porsha's words will allow us to imagine tonight. Without further ado, I will introduce our speaker and our moderator for tonight's events. Porsha Olayiwola is a Black futurist, poet, hip hop feminist, womanist. She is a native of Chicago who now resides in Jamaica Plains. She's a writer, performer, educator, and curator who uses Afrofuturism and surrealism to examine historical and current issues in the Black woman, and queer diasporas. She is an individual world poetry slam champion and the artistic director at Mass Leap, a literary youth organization. She is also an MFA candidate at Emerson College and is the current poet laureate for the city of Boston. Porsha's debut poetry collection, I Shimmer Sometimes, Too, came out in January of 2019 with Button Poetry Press. The book has been described as a book of self and community care, the pursuit of building a world that will not only keep you alive, but keep you joyful. Today, our moderator is Camara Brown. She is a PhD candidate in American Studies at Harvard University, where she writes about poetry, care, gender, and sexuality. Her interdisciplinary study draws methods and reading practices from both history and literary studies to ask what historians can learn about doing history from poetry. Her poetry has been published in the Adroit Journal, Bedfellows, and the Golden Shovel Anthology, as well as circulated in a collection curated by poet Laignel Brown titled Solidarity Texts. Porsha, please take it away.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here virtually with you all to share and read poems and, sip tea, metaphorically tea, but also, actual tea, getting cozy this season. I'm going to do a set of poems. Most of them are in progress. So I'm very excited. I feel cozy enough to share these poems that will hopefully at some point be edited with y'all. And I have been doing a lot of work around the Black diaspora and water. And so most of these poems are about that in some shape, form, or fashion. This first one is called We Drink at the Altanation Well. About 2 years ago, I went to visit my father in Nigeria, and we went to a slave port. And on the walk of no return, they had a well where Africans were forced to drink from. And it was said the well made them forget their memory. And, that the slavers had the water bewitched by a local doctor to, have them have short-term memory loss. so they would not remember the way home. And this poem is about that. And it's called We Drink at the Alternation Well. And it begins with an epigraph from Amy N. Dalton and Lee Hung that reads, motivated forgetting is a psychological defense mechanism whereby people cope with threatening and unwanted memories by suppressing them from consciousness. In Badagry, there is a hungry well of water and memory loss. In Badagry, there was a well of people lost across a haven of water. In Badagry, there was a port overwhelmed and unreturned. To omit within the mind is to ebb heavenward. Memory is a wealth choking the brain and the unresponsibility, violence in the mind, and the mind forgets in order to remember the self before the violence begat. And Badagry, trauma washes ungodly memory heavenward. In Badagry, there is an alternation well meant to wish away a passage, meant to unhaven a people. Violence is underwhelming in return what the body eats, the mind waters. Responsible is the memory for unremittal. Royal is the body for return. God is the mind for wafting. Forgetting is a port homeward. In Badagry, hungry memory grows angry. In Badagry, the memories unchoke, unhunger, trauma uneats the royal. In Badagry, there is a heaven of people responsible for the wealth of unremembering, for the well of us across a haven of water, overwhelmed and unreturned. Boom, and I'm just gonna move through this. I was reading this article and working on this paper. I'm also in school, so I've been doing that kind of academic labor, but I have been thinking a lot about Afro-pessimism, and I think one thing that really resonated with me was this idea of using the slave ship as a framework for understanding the world. And so I was like, I'll just start there tonight. So that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of like moving through history. We'll see how far we get in only, so much time. But this next poem is called Salvage, and it is an erasure of a poem by T.S. Eliot called The Dry Salvages, which was this very long poem, maybe 7 pages, about these 3 kind of rocks off the coast of Massachusetts. And in it, there is a line that is that reads something like, for the cargo of dead Negroes and chicken coops and cows. And so I thought it'd be fun. I keep having conversations with T.S. Eliot. I don't know why, to just erase the poem and give it something else. But this is called Salvage, again, with an epigraph. Historians estimate 2 million Africans drowned during the Middle Passage. The river is a brown god, untamed frontier, reminder of men unhonored but waiting the sea about us. Which beach tosses up our losses? Lobster pot men, salt rose voice, see how, see yelp breaking on water, wailing warning, tolling time. Our women lie between dawn and the ground's beginning. Where is the withering wreckage, the prayer unprayable, the consequence of living, of what is the drifting, the silent clamor, the last annunciation? Wind cannot think of an ocean not littered with the past. Banks will not bear the pain of the sea. Bone gods, hardly barely owning, revived and only backward looking behind recorded history is time, the past torment of others. The cargo of dead in restless waters is merely a monument, a sea mark, a sombre song of wistful regret. Those not here are murmuring in the harbor, the shore, the future, which man's death shall fructify lives? Seamen whose bodies suffer of sea, voyagers whose shrine stand with fish, women who queen heaven, who end in the sea's lips, wherever the spirit and the wrinkle of tragedy, there is a shaft of sunlight, a wild, unseen waterfall, music so deep it is not heard. Incarnation for us is the aim of undefeat. We've gone on trying our temporal life of soil. If you tell it backward, I've been thinking a lot about Afrofuturism and like reimagining stories and things. So ideally you read this poem forward and backward. I don't know if it really works. We'll see. Maybe we'll try it out. Let's see. Okay. If you tell it backward, St. Augustine, Florida, 1964. If you tell it backward, no Black person alive today can be found working at the Hilton. JT and Al went back to the Manson Motel and saw it had been reconstructed, but still a graveyard. Years before, the kids are all cuffed and dragged into the jailhouse nude, bearing bathing suits for a leap into segregation at a swimming pool. Question: what degree is the burn when acid gets in the mouth, in the eye, or on the body? The girls move from the edge where the manager, James Brock, that's his name, pours a bottle of muriatic acid into the water. He starts to lose his temper, his mind, his job, his white man power built on savagery. Anyway, he gets angry because the kids here are Black and ain't supposed to be in this pool, splashing to escape the burden of a southern June, barking on their bodies, feverish in their youth, sugared and sweet sweat, never telling their parents they were heading to the pool for some fun to slope the spine. I can see now JT and them just swelling, selling, swimming on a humid day where the summer swelters and heat from the sun glows the skin jet black. I'm gonna run it back just for fun and see what happens. Boom, if you tell it backward. The skin, jet black, the sun glows, and heat from the summer swelters on a humid day where swimming, just swelling, selling, JT and them, I can see now, to slope the spine for some fun to the pool they were heading, having never telling their parents, sugared and sweet sweat, feverish in their youth, June barking on their bodies, the burden of a southern splashing to escape in this pool are Black and ain't supposed to be because the kids here, anyway, he gets angry, built on savagery, his white man power, his mind, his job, his temper, he starts to lose. Into the water of muriatic acid pours a bottle, that's his name, James Brock, with the manager. From the edge, the girls move. On the body, in the eye, or the mouth, when acid gets in, is the burn what degree? Poor question. At a swimming for a leap into segregation, bearing bathing suits into the jailhouse nude and dragged are all cuffed years before the kids, a graveyard, reconstructed but still and saw it had been the Manson Motel. JT and Al went back at the Hilton, found working, alive today can be no Black person if you tell it backward. Boom, 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 having fun. I told you, at some point, all of these things, hopefully, we'll read it out loud, share with the people, and, work through some edits. This is called The Cops Behind Us. I hold my breath and remember I am alive. Neither murky memory nor headline, unlike Linnea, Dominique, and Ashanti, who were chased in the dark of morning for stealing a joyride. And what wonder were they chasing? And what chase were they evading? And what gave chase to them in the dim break of day when the sirens jailed the night, the cops grinning after realizing the collision stood at the water's bank and teethed like the grill of a Pontiac smiling into the mouth of a pond while the lips of the girls closed the whole breath or widened to wail. The cops too worried about muddying the smirk, guzzling their gut while Ania, Dominique, and Ashanti sank. And I bet them three floated thick as thieves, always together, eating greens and chicken at their grandma's house or holding one another up as the other juke bounced body into some boy barely able to stand during the homecoming dance. No, the cops hadn't thought about all that budding, only the swallowing throat that Eve allowed them to become. And all I could think about when Anthony finally crosses the bridge is that our car is still a car and not a mausoleum, and the road a road. And finally, sweet wind, I let go of my breath. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, I'm gonna do two more pieces. And then I think we're gonna get into a little bit of a conversation. I hope folks are feeling good at home, cozy at home, you know, pensive, you know, because I love history. I love writing about history. So thanks for letting me share this work of water with y'all. This one is to a reimagination. I don't know if folks have seen, what's that new show, Lovecraft Country? Yes. But I have totally been interested in the horror genre, a magical horror genre, and within poetry. So I've been playing with that along with some, again, reimagination. This is about Dorothy Dandridge, excuse me, who was a famous Black singer, actress. The story goes, you know, she was getting ready to sing at a pool, or I'm sorry, at a hotel in Vegas, and they were like, she said she wanted to get in the water, and they were like, if you get in, we'll have to drain the pool because, you know, Black folks aren't allowed in. And she dips her toe in it, and this is that story, or an imagination of that story. It's called Dorothy Dips a Toe into a pool after being warned the water would be drained. Should a Black person swim in it? 1953, Las Vegas. And all at once, without and within, each well of wet everywhere swelled dry. The woman in the shower, shriveling, shaken bare. The cook steaming at the sink's faulty faucet, the rust keening and dragging itself through pipes. Chalices unfilled, air wilts the face. Moisture abandons the flesh, the breath, the girth. Water unflows, runs away like blood from a wound. The swimming pool, brimming moments ago, now hold mothers who hold babies dry sobbing at its base. Guests at the last frontier lay leisurely, their bodies broiled brittle on the deck. The Black spell is the yes cascading over a no. The anti to the anti, all kept from me in spite, shall spite keep from you with force. And in another land, unpromised, the color blue opens and spreads to blanket each eye. Dorothy stands at the water's ledge. Her curls and linen lie loose. Her skin, cool and sweet, sings a song unsang but known. Dorothy, a tall tide, coaxing herself into herself. Dorothy, a good curse, moves until waves wade at her waist. The dancing wet rushes to gather at her hips. She cups the clear in her palms and splashes upward. Dorothy lifts her arms in ocean rain, urges the body to name itself religion. Dorothy splatters and ripples bring forth a sanctum. Each droplet is plenty for the city's south side. A shower gives itself to the children on 83rd, playing at the hydrant. A spray fills the pot of collards on the back burner. Another flows through a school's fountain, once lined with lead. Dorothy swishes water into the sugar breeze and it lingers in air. No one thirsts. Moisture soothes a lonely throat. Dew demands a mother's seeds to grow. Dorothy raises the ocean, and oh, I want to tell you how her hands cradled full drops toward the sky, how the water could hardly stand to let her go. Boom. Okay, I'm just going to check in really quick because I know we're getting close. I'm going to check and see if I have time for one more or if we should get into the combo.
You have time for one more.
Okay, I'm going to do this one more. It is actually a commission piece. So I don't know if that it's a part of a collection, but it's part of a podcast that I think it's with, I don't really know who's it with. I can't remember the other name, but also with Ben and Jerry. And folks should check it out. Maybe I can shoot that over to you all because I think it's definitely a podcast worth exploring. It's a short series of 4, but this is why I wrote that. The first episode is about the first 4 slave ships, and I think the very first slave ship built on in this country was built in Salem, Mass. So, you know, I was compelled. Also, I had been thinking about water, so this felt again my jam, if you will. Unfortunately, this is called. I haven't shared it with a live audience, so it is my first time revisiting and also being in community with this. So thank you all. It's called I Cannot Wade Through the Past Without Waking the Dead. I cannot weigh wailing, summoning the history as the present of this country is homing the hunting, honing the howls, the clang of cuffs, calling chains a lineage. The power of the tongue is the difference between the new world and the old. A savage and savagery, a colonist and killer. Manifest destiny is the law of attraction, is conjuring under a different guise. Language is a spell. Wish and curse. Declare independence and the war ensues. Declare the land your country and the soil gaseous crimson. Declare a human as slave and no one asks how bright the color clipping her universe is. History is a complex wordsmith. The first slave ships forged in this country were named Desire, Prosperity, Fortune, and Hope. Desire was built on a summer lawn in Salem and set sail in 1637. The ship, a vessel, a belly, a black hole sold indigenous folks to the Caribbean in exchange for Africans to slave the colonies. A body for a life, a lie, a cargo to carcass, desire from the Latin desidero, meaning to wish to obtain, to long for, to lust after what one loathes. Learn one man can claim desire and conquer all another man desires. One can lust after another once. The thirst is forever in drought. America, namesake after a conqueror, calls a slave ship hope, and it becomes a blueprint for the future. calls a boat a fortune, and all aboard become possessions. History has a way of repeating, or history itself is repeating, or history is a reaping. Ghost gun shot, locking us in the open field of an eye, the bodies, police to pavement, the ballot, exchange for bullet, plantation for prison, death for life, lie and lingo. What you damn damns you, the conquer, America, labels us nigga and we shape it endearing. Names us a ghetto and we craft culture. Labels us desire and we say from the Latin phrase deciduous, meaning from the stars, as in emerging from the black hole of a ship's bows, as in them folks came from a dark galaxy, as in them folks a heavenly body, celestial beings shafted, shackled constellations, night skying the ground. And that's that poem. Thank you guys for letting me share that with y'all.
Porsha, that was incredible. Incredible.
Wow, you're too kind, and thank you. Thank you for being with me.
Yo, thank you so much also for sharing this work in progress. That feels really special and awesome. So thank you. And if you're like listening, you know, snap where you are from home or clap or put it in the chat. Send some appreciation for Porsha's words. Incredible. I'm obsessed with this new work and definitely is in line with some of the questions I wanted to ask you today about your work and history. This work seems even more entrenched in like historical sites and historical events per se. And so I'd love if you could speak about your Afrofuturist framework, Afro-surrealist framework, and the relationship between that and the sort of historical work you're doing in this new project. Like, how do we think of these two ideas, frameworks, methods perhaps together, especially given that this is hosted by the Royal House and Slave Quarters, like a site of public history, right? Do you see these two things having some shared goals or possibilities together?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think I've been thinking about futurism as a tool, as a weapon, as a way in which to name and see the future as I wish to. And, you know, I think a big part of, for me, futurism is leaning back or going back and getting it, right? And so I have been using history as a way for it. I've always secretly just loved history. I've been a history nerd. I was on the, you know, seriously, I did history competitions, you know, so I've always loved history. I got my degree in African American studies. I just so happen to be a poet, but really, you know, the work is, for me, is always digging back into that. And again, I think the principle of Sankofa, as far as futurism, is also this idea of going back to get it, you know?
That really like clarifies for me the relationship, and bringing up Sankofa is also really clarifying for thinking about the relationship between Afrofuturism and sort of the historical memory work you're doing in your poetry. When you said history is a reaping, I was like, that really struck me. And I wondered if you think about your poetic work, or maybe some of your work as the Boston Poet Laureate, as in the frame of like protest poetry work. This series is called Poetry is Protest, and that's a genre, right, that people categorize certain poets and poems in, right? Protest poetry. And I was recently, I saw a webinar a few weeks ago with Dion Brand and Harriet Mullen that was by the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics at Pittsburgh. And Dion Brand, when talking about, asked a question about writing in this time, you know, and what is poetic work like right now? What is it doing? And Dion Brand was immediately talked about a revolutionary poetic tradition, that she saw herself and her work as aligned with all of these different poets in all these different moments, writing against whatever colonialism, racism, homophobia in their own time period. So I'm wondering if you see yourself and your work in the category of protest poetry, or something more expansive or specific, like a revolutionary poetic tradition, or something else. Kind of like, what lineage or tradition do you see your poetry as being a part of?
Yeah, I think that's not hard to answer. It's very easy to answer.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking that, like, I am a protest. Like this, I am like not legal. 50% of this country we see do not want people that are of color, that are queer, that are women, all of these things to exist. And so if I am to innately just even be a poet, in the contradiction of this country, then it is always going to be a protest, because just living, unfortunately, is a protest. But that aside, I definitely consider it protest poetry. But totally, I would definitely consider it in the genre of protest poetry. It don't totally has a negative connotation. I'm just really writing for me, me and my people. So I guess that is, the protest is always about a love,
Right.
So.
Right. No, that's exactly it. Thank you for that. And I should have said this at the beginning, but if you have any questions for Porsha, you can put them in the Q&A right now, and we can read them out in the next 10 minutes or so. Would love to hear some questions from the audience. I'm sure Porsha would love to answer any questions like that. The other thing, this is maybe jumping around, but as I was reading your work, I shimmer sometimes too. If anyone wants to buy it, I definitely suggest that. It's wonderful. I was struck by the use of religiosity and God as being the self at sometimes, God as being sister, mother, and other places. I loved the poem God is good all the time. I was obsessed as someone who grew up in the church. My home church was Trinity United Church of Christ on the South Side, so that stuck out to me. But I liked the also use of God in these newer poems. When you were talking about, you had this line where you said, "Oh, I have notes everywhere."
No, I never thought about that till you bring it up. But as you say it, I'm like, I can totally see this. But go on, I'm so sorry.
The God is everywhere.
Yeah, I'm like, my mom, my sister is some kind of God. I remember at the end.
Right, and in the beginning, you say in the very beginning, right? For the love of self, for the God in me, right? And Entisake Shange, right? Reference as well. And in the most recent work, you talk about the river as a God. And so I guess you're saying that you hadn't really made these connections yet, but I'd love if you could riff a little about God in your newer work and its relationship to water and history, perhaps. How are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about that?
I mean, you are definitely making me think about it. But I think you're onto something. Like, I would even say this body of work, I told myself it has to be different in that I have to first come through to it via God, So like, I spent a lot of time thinking specifically, right, about the water gods and the Orishas. That has been a struggle. I think they're like trying to talk to me and take their time with me, and I just have to sit and listen. But I think it definitely is present. As far as water as a god, yes, you're totally onto it. I think about water a lot, entirely too much. But water is, all of the water that has ever existed is the water that exists. There's never new water. So it's like, it's been here so long, it's been here an incredibly long time. And so it does have a memory. I think I was also recently looking up the fact that, like, God, I can't even remember, but it's another one of those things that makes you think that the water has a brain and a memory and a history. So I don't know. Is it a God? Yes. there's Olukan and Yemeya, and, so absolutely, it's history of God. I don't know, history is a ghost. The water is a reaping, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
It's something.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that riffing. It also just speaks to me reminds me of Toni Morrison's essay, The Site of Memory, and flooding, and it's
oh yeah, she's at the center of this.
Right. I totally can hear that.
All water has a perfect memory. Okay. And it's forever trying to get back to herself. Yes, Toni. Yeah.
Yes. There are some questions here, so I hope I can get a few of them out. Colleen Cooney writes, can you talk about the Tell It Backwards poem? Yes, please. And the process, how hard was it to write to make it work both ways? It was very powerful and twice as powerful to hear in both directions. Thank you.
Oh, this is great, because I'm like, every time I look at that poem, I'm like, Porsha, you need to do better. So I'm glad that folks could vibe with it. I would say it's not an ekphrastic poem, but it is an ekphrastic poem. I don't know if people know it is an ekphrastic poem. The image of the white manager pouring, the bleach bottle into the pool. It's one of the more famous images of segregation. But it was just writing it, and it kind of reads backward line by line. I think, it's just take time. Anybody, you just do it, but it takes a lot of time to figure out, and good diction, good choosing of the right words, and good line breaks. But it's just a little time. That's the secret ingredient to cooking and writing, maybe time. Reading.
True. When you were reading, I wanted to see them. I wanted to see the forms on the page so much. And that just even speaks to it even more. Lynn Weiss writes, I'm really struck by the long titles. I wonder if Porsha wants to say anything about her titling.
Yeah, it's like, I've been thinking a lot about titles. My partner is also a poet, and definitely is into the long title vibes. I don't know what it is, but it's really just like it's like an introduction. It's like a setup. It can do so much more work than I think people allow it to do. It can be its own character. I was teaching a class this summer, and it's only 10, but 1/10 of the class was focused on titles. Wow. Because I think it can just be a thing. It can set you up so well. But I also think it's just sassy. Long titles are so sassy.
Well, also, did you have a class on epigraphs? Because I've also noticed in a lot of your poems, there's so many epigraphs.
Well, I think it's because I write a lot about history. And so I think that it allows me to get to the poem without necessarily having to state the history. It allows me to say something else. I just have a lot to say. I talk entirely too much, and then I put it in the poem.
Yeah, that's great. We have another question. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Tichuana Chinyelu, for Porsha. When you write historical pieces, how do you deal with the lack of primary sources regarding the voices of characters? Great question.
Yeah, that's hard. That's really hard. I think it depends on the character. I don't think I've gone to a place where it wasn't a voice I couldn't write, if that makes sense. I haven't been in anybody's voice other than mine as a narrator. I've been a shark once from the perspective of the middle passage. So I don't think, that was that point. I think anybody, write from a shark's perspective, whatever. But I don't know that I've done that. But I think that is the thing that I need to do. I haven't. But you see, the thing is to still be closer to, I think it'd still be close to my own voice. I don't know. That's tough. I think I do read a lot, though. I'm sorry. I'm talking too much. Okay. But I read a lot. The Slave Ship. Read that book. I can't remember
No, that's great. Maybe we have time for one more question. Yeah, and I just, on the side, writing from the perspective of water that you do, that kind of comes out. I wonder how that relates to this question too.
I'm gonna stop that.
One more last question from Bianca, who says, for Porsha, what are you listening to and reading right now that is keeping you alive? Heart emoji, thanks.
That is a great question. I'm honestly, I said before we got live on the Zoom call, I was so busy, but I've been teaching. I've been teaching actually Afro TAing at MCI Concord, an Afrofuturism class. So honestly, that's been my, I mean, that's clearly something that I'm really interested in. Also, that's my only fun reading is in preparation for this class. But currently reading Brown Girl in the Ring. I don't know if folks have read that, but it's great. Caribbean writer, I think Nalo Hopkins' son. But Brown Girl in the Ring, check it out. Definitely Black diaspora, surrealism, magical situations. It's good.
I definitely wrote that down. I
Good.
definitely.
It's good. It's good. It's good. I definitely recommend the audiobook as well.
Yes. Thank you so much, Porsha.
Thank you all for making space for me, honestly, in this.
Wow, 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 wow. That was an amazing reading and an amazing question and answer session. Thank you so much, Porsha. Thank you so much, Camara. Please, if you haven't had a chance to read Porsha's book, please get it. The link is in the chat. If you want to learn more about the Royal House and Slave Quarters, please visit our website at royalhouse.org. You can learn more about the history of the site as well as become a member. There's also a link to the Royal House and Slave Quarters e-newsletter. And Porsha, do you want to shout out your social media for people to follow you?
Totally. I'm most active on Instagram, but they all are the same at Porsha Olayiwola. That's it. So
that's amazing. And as always, you can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're also on Instagram. So please, please, please keep in touch. Join our newsletter where you can keep up to date with all that's happening at our site. And please check out Porsha's website as well so you can see where she's reading next. Again, thank you all for tuning in on a Friday night. Thank you for spending time with us. And Porsha, thank you for sharing your poetry with us. And Camara,
thank you guys for being patient with me and for having me. This was a lot of fun.
No problem. And thank you, Camara, for your wonderful
Thank you, Camara.
Of course, just honored to talk with Porsha and read her amazing work. Can't wait for the new project. Literally can't wait.
7 years. Give it 7 years. No.
All right, everyone. Have a great night.